It's never too late for abortion in New York State. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, you may have heard that New York has signed into law their new Reproductive Health Act, which does a variety of things, and we'll try to get into a few of those details in the course of this show. But I wanted to get your take on one aspect of it. I know that you have been a critic of the idea that the Supreme Court, 5 people in the entire country can rule the other 330 million people. The whole purpose of the Reproductive Health Act in New York State was just in case the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade, it will still be the law in the Empire State. Bill, isn't that a great example of how federalism is supposed to work?
Normally I have fun with these devil's advocate questions, but I can't remember being so ashamed to be an American as I was when I heard this news. Look, abortion is the third rail of politics. It is the great dividing issue, and the reason it's such a divisive issue is because the idea of free choice is what we believe in, and I can summarize this completely. If it turns out it is a collection of cells, then you have a choice to do whatever you want with it. If it's a person, on the other hand, it's murder. So the question is an unborn infant a person, or is it a collection of cells? Well, there's nothing on the spectrum between birth and conception and birth. There's no point on that spectrum anywhere where one thing magically happens. You can certainly say that 2 cells is a collection of cells. You can certainly say that a baby that's 10 minutes before being born is a human being. And somewhere on this spectrum, people who are pro-choice try to find some kind of a dividing line. And I think no matter what your position on abortion is, I can't imagine how anybody with any kind of a soul wouldn't say that the sooner the better, and not only the sooner the better. There comes a point when there's just no question about it, Scott. I mean, it reminds me of, appropriately enough, it reminds me of that definition of pornography. Was it a Supreme Court justice who said that? He said, "I can't describe it to you, but I know it when I see it." This is appalling, and for the progressives who are so proud of this, I'm sure it makes them think that, wow, the French must really admire us, and so must the Germans and the Swedes and all the other people that we look up to. I don't think there's a country in Europe that has a after first trimester abortion law. Most of them are 8 weeks, 10 weeks, something like that. I mean, the whole thing is appalling. But if you're trying to look civilized by saying that you can cut this baby to pieces 5 minutes before it's supposed to be delivered, or in some cases after it's been delivered, then this country's not just gone wrong politically. Then there is absolute, genuine moral evil at work in America, and it is a spiritual rot of society that says that at that point, if you're willing to make that decision at that point, then personal selfishness has become so rampant and so malignant in this society that we're willing to do things like this. This is appalling.
Bill, the overall purpose of the Reproductive Health Act, and that name...
I don't care what the overall purpose of the Reproductive Health Act is, Scott.
The name of the act is very specific in that they wanted to focus on a woman's health, and the purpose of the act is to take abortion out of the criminal code. Now, some Republicans have raised the question, well, what happens then if somebody beats a woman and a child in the course of that is killed? And, previously that would have been a murder charge. Now it's up in the air.
A man beats a pregnant woman. The unborn child is killed. Used to be murder. Now it's just assault.
It's unclear at this point.
Unclear at this point. Of course it's unclear at this point. Everything's unclear at this point. And the entire purpose of the left is to make everything as unclear as possible at any point in time as they possibly can. Of course it's unclear at this point. It's unclear at this point to people who have no moral compass, no moral sense, no sense of, forget honor, forget courage, forget integrity, forget the virtues. There's no fundamental humanity left in people. to say that. If I've got a woman who's 8.5, 9 months pregnant, and I decide I'm going to kick her, and that baby dies, oh well, it's just whether it's murder or assault. I'm unclear at this point. I'll bet you are unclear on this point. I'll bet you're very unclear on this point.
Bill,
the question is, why are you writing laws and not in some lunatic asylum someplace? That's the question.
Another change that comes in under the Reproductive Health Act in New York State has been the fact that it used to require a doctor to perform an abortion, and especially when we're talking about abortions after 24 weeks. Now it's got to be a licensed healthcare professional, which means it could be a physician's assistant, it could be a nurse, it could be a midwife. And soon it'll be a cosmetologist. You can get it done while you're having your nails trimmed or something at a hair salon. But shouldn't the individual have a right to choose the healthcare professional they want for a procedure that's legal in this country and in that state?
They should. Well, first of all, this procedure was not legal in this country up until New York passed the law. So I'm talking about New York's law. Okay, I'm talking about New York's law. Yeah, I guess if you're going to decide to cut up a baby that's 10 minutes about to be born, you might want to have a doctor do that, I would imagine, because it's a fairly extensive procedure. Now, look, I understand this issue, and I understand this whole my body thing. I understand all of it. All right, I have an opinion on it, but it's my opinion. But there is no question that your ability to make that decision, if it's going to be existing in the first place, has to be limited to a relatively short period of time. Because if it turns out that you can in New York, if you can kill a baby right after it's born, what about right after it's born? And didn't we hear something about that, by the way? Wasn't there something in there about babies that have been delivered live, and then the mother decides that, well, maybe she doesn't want it, so we'll make it comfortable? Did I hear that, or is that just fiction?
Yeah, I believe that was from a discussion in another state, actually. But
in Virginia, right?
Some of the governor
okay, so
of Virginia.
The fact that we're having this discussion, Scott, the fact that politicians are having this discussion is a sign of how far down the road to hell we have gone as a people. If actual elected politicians in New York or Virginia are sitting there and trying to decide, because it's not clear, because the position's not clear. This woman's just given birth to a live baby. The live baby is lying there screaming. And since she hasn't decided yet whether she wants to keep it or not, it's not a question of putting it up for abortion. It's a question of, well, should we kill it or shouldn't we? It depends. And what do you say? How do you explain this to, how do you explain this to...
Well, one of the arguments that the left is trying to make is that what we're talking about is a very, very tiny percentage of the abortions. And I'll give you some numbers on this. They're saying that it's about 1%. Well, I looked up the stats, and in 2015, there were some 169 abortions that we know of. So 1% of that would be about 6,300 abortions. I guess I should ask you this question, and yes, a year. That was that year in 2015. I guess I should ask this question. Republicans are quite upset about this whole movement, both in Virginia and in New York State and elsewhere around the country.
Human beings should be upset about this, Scott. Human beings in Africa and China should be upset about this. Does
this play in an election race? Can
Republicans? There's some questions there's some questions I'm not going to answer, and I'm not going to answer that question. I am not going to answer that question. For me to answer that question, for me to talk about the political implications of something like this, is for me to descend into the same cesspool of moral reasoning and electioneering and all the rest of it that gets us into this position in the first place. I absolutely will not comment on whether or not there are political repercussions to this or strategies or anything. It's abhorrent, it's disgraceful, it's disgusting, and it is an indication of an insane, life-hating, desperately evil party that would be talking about these kind of things in the first place. I'm not going to talk politics about this. This is too important to talk about politics. This is something that every single American should be just absolutely ashamed of, and to say it's a disgrace to the Democratic Party is to miss the point. It's a disgrace to America that this kind of law could be passed. It's just repellent.
Oh, final question. One of the provisions of the new Reproductive Health Act in New York State changes the language for an abortion after 24 weeks of pregnancy to say not just if the life of the mother is in jeopardy, but it includes the viability of the fetus as well as the health of the mother. And the act does not explicitly define what the health of the mother might mean.
Of course not. Of course it doesn't. The health of the mother might be her mental health. And look, before you drive down the streets of Los Angeles, give you another idea about where we are. You drive down the streets of Los Angeles, and the single greatest number of stores you see, they're not Starbucks, it's marijuana dispensaries. They're everywhere. And before marijuana became legal by prescription here, and still today, in fact, this is a perfect example. In California, my understanding is that in order to have legal marijuana, you have to have a doctor's prescription. So guess what, Scott? Guess what? Every single one of these clinics has. Every single one of them. It's not a hospital. It's not a doctor's office. Not a medical center. It's not a clinic. It is a store that sells marijuana. And guess what? You can walk into any one of those stores and find a licensed medical doctor who will write you a prescription because you have headaches or you need to gain some weight or whatever the case may be. You're a little fuzzy in the vision. They
happens to be an investor in the enterprise, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt. So the doctor will write whatever prescription he has to. I don't know what the symptoms are, but no doubt there is a blanket anxiety, let's say. As a medical doctor, I find that Jim here is suffering from anxiety, and therefore I am prescribing medical marijuana. Here you go, knock yourself out. So to say that that this thing is going to be regulated somehow. I mean, I still find myself appalled and amazed that we're even having this discussion in the first place. You want to have a discussion about at what point a fetus becomes a person. That's the discussion. That's the one. But this is a moral abomination, and it is demeaning to the entire issue to talk about the nuts and bolts of the outcome of something this disgraceful.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Whittle now comes to you 5 days a week, thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com who contribute to this enterprise and have been doing so for years now. We appreciate their part of this, and we know that without those members, we couldn't do this. We couldn't spread these messages, these conversations around the world. So we're grateful for that. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.